cycle. The phase 3 would be maximum endurance. It's 3 to 4 weeks long. We're focusing on developing that EN3 energy system, and it's going to be very fatiguing, probably the hardest of the training phases. Phase 4 is our speed phase, kind of what we're doing right now with the swimmers in the water. We're trying to get them to switch gears and get out of that long swimming mode. Working on race rehearsal. It's uncomfortable and it's challenging both physically and mentally. And then phase 5, what we're leading into, and what everybody likes to hear, taper phase, which could be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks depending upon who you are and what you do. And the whole goal with taper is to rest and recover and prepare for our season-ending meet. You know, developing a season plan, I think the first thing we've got to do is find out what that focus meet is at the end of the year for everybody. And I think it's real important that everybody has a season-ending meet, whether it's a junior nationals or a state meet or whatever it may be, but everybody should have something to end on and something to shoot for to give some closure to the end of the season. We're looking at figuring out the total number of weeks that we have to work with, plan backwards, starting with the taper and planning the energy systems backwards, figure out how many weeks we have in those previous cycles. We're talking with the kids regarding training. We do a stair-step kind of a training approach where we're going to, week 1, we'll break up the season into cycles or chunks. So they'll be either 4 or 5 weeks in length, and each week's going to build off of the previous week in both volume and intensity. And the last week of that cycle, either week 4 or week 5, is always recovery, but we'll do some kind of testing to kind of monitor their training progression, see if they've actually gotten any better training-wise. The whole goal of training is adaptation, allowing the body to get tired and give them a training stimulus and then allow them to recover and then come back stronger so they can work at a higher capacity. You know, developing a season plan, I think you've got a balance between physiology, biomechanical efficiency, being efficient in technique, and planning competitions to prepare for that end of the season meet. And you know, looking at adding competitions into the season plan. You know, if you look at the beginning of the year, we try and give you guys a lot of different options as far as meets along the way. At the end of the season, the focus should be whichever meet your swimmer can swim at the highest level, whether it's junior nationals or the state meet or the silver state meet or the regional meet, whatever meet that may be. That's the meet that we want to try and swim our fastest at. We look at meets as along the way as opportunities to rehearse race strategy for the end of the season, chance to implement training skills that we practice during the meet or during practice for the meet. We like to give swimmers opportunities to take these skills out of the practice setting and put them in a racing environment and see how they respond. Sometimes it's difficult to do, to try and pick up a skill that you've done in practice a lot, but then try and do it when there's pressure on and somebody's racing next to you. And we always talk to the kids about streamlining off of walls and not breathing off of turns, and they can do it all the time in practice, but you get in a racing situation and they look like we've never talked about this at all. And it kind of makes us as coaches look bad because I know we do it every day, but it's a different kind of thing trying to get them to do it when it counts in a meet. I think the other important thing that parents and kids should know that you're not always going to swim fast all the time, and I think that's a tough transition for younger kids into senior swimming. They're used to always being able to get up in the box and swim fast, and as we start training harder, that's not always going to happen. And as you get older, that happens less and less throughout the season. And I think that the other important point is that the focus can't always be on the end result. It can't always be on the time. You know, we can see improvement in a lot of different areas. As long as the effort's where it should be and the skill corrections are being worked on, then I think the competition is successful even if the times weren't real fast. Now, if the swims are slow and technique work is terrible and swimmers are just going along through the motions, then I think that's a different story. But I think that there are a lot of different ways to see improvement and success other than just looking at the scoreboard at the end of your race. I think that we as coaches kind of see a big picture, sometimes it's difficult for parents and swimmers to kind of see the big picture in what we're trying to do. I think that as far as swimming in enough meets, what are enough? I think we talked to the older kids about trying to get into 5, 6, 7 meets throughout those 24 weeks, enough so that you guys get used to competing and get used to being in racing shape. We try and schedule different meets on the schedule so that we've got different levels of competition. And I think that it's important for you guys as swimmers to try and swim in some meets where you are the highest level of competition there, somewhere the competition is at your level, and somewhere you're at the bottom of the level. And I think that you learn a lot of different things competing at different levels of meets, and the only way you can get better is to do those things. And I think that when we're at meets where you're one of the better swimmers at the meet, then we as coaches are going to be harder on you to make sure that you're doing things correctly. When we get to the higher pressure big meets, I think it's our job as coaches to stay positive, lots of reassurance and confidence boosting. The last phase, and the phase that we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about here in greater detail, is the taper phase. There's really not a lot of literature on taper. These 2 books that I have over here, this is this Ernie McGleesko book is 800 pages. It's kind of the Bible of swimming fastest. In this book, there are only 14 pages talking about taper. 800 pages and only 14 talk about tapering. This other book by Bill Sweetnam, he's a great Australian coach, it's 350 pages, there's only 20 pages or 15 pages on tapering. So, not a lot of literature on it. The taper phase, usually 1 to 4 weeks in duration. I usually use a kind of a gradual approach to tapering by cutting back the workload, kind of coming back down the stairs, so to speak. Dropping 200 to 400 yards off the volume each workout day, as well as cutting back the workload done in each energy system that we're training. Taper phase is very individualized. It's seen in the factors in planning a taper, and we're going to kind of go through that next. If you want to take a look at the back of your page, there's a couple sample taper plans that I put together just for you guys to see that kind of what we did. There's one from summer of 2006 and one from high school girls season, I think, in 2007. And my point here is just that there can be a lot of things going on at a lot of different times at the end of the season. That summer tapers at that point in time, we may be tapering kids for the Silver State meet. We'll have kids that are getting ready for the state champ meet, sprinters and distance group. We'll have a junior national sprint group and a distance group, and we may have, some kids maybe going to the speedo meet. So there's a lot of things going on, and sometimes it can be a circus. But I think that's all the more reason to make sure that you've got a plan so that you know who needs to do what and when. Talking about taper, have you guys ever heard someone say that they hit or they missed their taper, or that so and so doesn't know how to taper or swim in a taper? Anybody heard those comments? I think that a lot of people think that a taper is a magical thing that just happens each season, and that because it's taper time, everybody automatically improves. I think that everybody's got to remember that taper is just one training phase in the season. And with senior level athletes, all those 5 training phases that we talked about in the season plan are all linked together. You've got to have all those phases planned out, and you've got to do well in each of those phases. And the taper is just kind of the culmination of it. So I kind of look at, the first day of taper really is the first day of practice. And if you're not doing it from day one, then it's going to be hard to do it well at the end of the year and have a successful taper. I don't think that an out-of-shape athlete can will themselves to a peak performance, no matter how mentally tough they are. And I think that there's no magic to it. I think that